In the south of England in the county of Dorset, close to a beautiful and sandy bay, is an abandoned village that stands as a memorial. England has a history of abandoned villages. Many were deserted after the Black Death, but Tyneham is completely different. This village fell victim to the Second World War, but was not affected by German bombing, invasion or any other attacks. But why was this village abandoned? Why was it never inhabited again? Join us today as we look at the village abandoned because of World War II. And remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Close to the famous Luftwaffe Cove in Door lies Tyneham. To get access to the village is rather restricted, and it is only open to the public at certain times. But this is a village that has a rather deep and dark secret, and at the heart of the story is the British government and the army. It's an area that's been populated since the Roman times, where small fishing communities were set up, but in the 1940s all of the villagers were forced out. They had a rather straightforward life before. There was no electricity in the village and very little running water, except from a local source. There was a grand building inside of the village known as the Great House or Tyneham House, and this was an ornate mansion. There was even a school for the young local children to learn inside of, with a teacher instructing them how to read and write. The local bay was a place of work for the villagers, who fished in the waters around the bay, and it would have been a lovely place to live, rather isolated and cut off from the outside world. But in 1943, everything changed. In November 1943, the villagers were informed that they would be forced out of the village and their homes within 28 days. They had very little say in the decision, and it had been made by the British government. This must have been devastating for the people of the village, as many of their families had lived there for generations. It was British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, along with the War Office, who gave the orders to take the land. It had been occupied for centuries with the inhabitants, seemingly forgotten by the world, but now the village was thrust into the biggest and deadliest conflict that the world had ever seen. The small isolated village was taken by the government for training purposes and would have been used for the preparation for D-Day and the Normandy landings in the invasion of the beaches, which would take place in June 1944 and would turn the tide of the war. Tyneham itself is very close to the Luftwaffe firing ranges, and these were being used heavily by tank crews who were training, and the government decided to claim the village and the surrounding land as a place to continue to train soldiers. So access was restricted by the orders of the military, and today this is still the case. You have to check online about the firing schedule to even try and get close to the village. Today many of the buildings have fallen almost into ruin, all caused by a letter that stated, "In order to give our troops the fullest opportunity to perfect their training in the use of modern weapons of war, the army must have an area of land particularly suited to the special needs in which they use live shells. For this reason you will realise the chosen area must be cleared of all civilians. It is regretted that in the national interest it is necessary to move you from your homes, and everything possible will be done to help you, both by payment of compensation and by finding other accommodation for you if you are unable to do so yourself. The government appreciate this is no small sacrifice which you are being asked to make, but they are sure that you will give this further help towards winning the war with a good heart." When learning the fate of the village, one visitor wrote, "It's nearly Christmas, but there is little cheer as the last of the villagers leave. Many leave reluctantly, particularly the elderly, but with the enemy just across the channel, others are relieved." 225 people who spent their whole lives living in the village were forced out. On the 17th of December 1943, the last person of Tyneham left, and they thought one day they would come back. The last resident left a note on the church door that said, "Please treat the church and the houses with care. We have given up our homes where many of us have lived for generations to help you win the war, to keep men free. We shall return one day and thank you for treating the village kindly." Whilst the soldiers were training for D-Day, the village was damaged by shelling and the army training. The villagers were told they could return after the war, but this never happened. As the Second World War ended and the following years focused on the Cold War, more training took place in the area, and the land surrounding Tyneham was kept in use by the military. The land was eventually purchased by the army, and today it still remains used. The villagers of Tyneham were forgotten and left behind, and the village became a ghost one, but today some access allows visitors to go and learn the story of these residents and learn of their 5-decade-long struggle to return to live in the village. The last remaining villager of Tyneham, Arthur Grant, who was just a boy when he was forced out, a boy who was taught in the village school, died in 2010, and today he lies at rest in the churchyard of the village that meant so much to him. So in some senses Grant and some other villagers did return to the village they once called home. Tyneham is a village frozen in time and was sacrificed for the training of the army and the invasion that later went on to liberate so many from Nazi occupation. However, when visiting, it's incredibly sad to see, and you can't help but understand the sorrow and sadness that many of the residents had in 1943, being forced out of their homes for the war effort. The fact they were never allowed to return, except to be buried in the graveyard of the church, is incredibly sad. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to like and share, and also subscribe. Once again, thank you so much for watching.